Liam thought it was over the second Noah stopped moving. He stood there in the snow, chest heaving, knuckles screaming with a pain he'd learned to ignore years ago. His breath came in white clouds that vanished into the darkness above. The deserted highway stretched endlessly in both directions, no headlights, no witnesses, just snow and silence and the kind of quiet that makes men believe they've gotten away with something. Noah lay crumpled on the icy asphalt, his lean frame twisted at an angle that looked wrong even in the dim light. His dark hair fanned across the road, already dusted with fresh snow. The hoodie he'd been wearing, Liam's hoodie, actually, the gray one Liam had bought last Christmas, had ridden up, exposing pale skin that would bruise purple by morning. If there was a morning. Liam crouched beside him, pressing 2 fingers against Noah's neck. The pulse was there. Weak. Thready. Barely clinging. Should have just let it go, Liam muttered, though Noah couldn't hear him anymore. Noah's face was turned away, but Liam could see the damage. Swollen cheekbone, split lip, blood matting his dark hair where his skull had cracked against the frozen ground. Steam rose from the blood, impossibly warm against the frigid air. Good enough. Liam straightened, wiping his hands on his jeans. His breath fogged in sharp bursts. The cold bit through his leather jacket, but he barely felt it. Adrenaline still hummed through his veins, electric, righteous, alive. Noah had brought this on himself. All those months of questioning him. Doubting him. Threatening to tell people the truth about things he didn't even understand. Things that would destroy everything Liam had built. I'm done protecting your secrets, Liam. That's what Noah had said. Standing in the doorway of his apartment like he had any power at all. Like he knew what those words would cost him. The Omega. The pretty, fragile Omega who'd walked into Liam's life 3 years ago and somehow convinced everyone Liam was the lucky one. Noah with his art and his soft smiles and his ridiculous belief that love could fix anything. Love hadn't fixed shit. Love had made Noah think he had the right to question. Liam glanced down at Noah's still form. His jeans were soaked through from the snow. One sneaker had come off during the struggle, lying a few feet away like discarded evidence. The cold would finish what Liam's fist started. Hypothermia worked fast at these temperatures. 28 degrees. Wet clothing. Unconsciousness. Noah had maybe 90 minutes before his core temperature dropped too low. Maybe less. By morning, he'd be another tragic headline. Local artist found dead after vehicle breakdown. Authorities would piece together a story, car trouble, attempted walk for help, exposure. Nobody would question frozen bodies in Minnesota winters. Nobody questioned Omegas who wandered off alone. Liam walked back to his truck, boots crunching through snow. He paused at the driver's door, looking back one last time. Noah hadn't moved. The snow was already beginning to cover him, gentle and inexorable, like the earth claiming what belonged to it. He climbed into the cab. Engine roaring to life. Heat blasted from the vents. His hands trembled slightly as he gripped the steering wheel. Not from guilt. From adrenaline crash. He'd never hit anyone that hard before. Never felt bone give way beneath his knuckles. Never watched someone crumple like their strings had been cut. It had been easier than he expected. The headlights swept across Noah's body one final time as Liam shifted into drive. For a moment, Noah's face caught the light, eyes closed, lips parted, snow collecting in his dark lashes. Even broken, he was beautiful. That was the problem with Omegas. They were too pretty for their own good. Made alphas think they could take whatever they wanted. Then the truck turned, and Noah disappeared into the darkness behind him. Liam pressed the accelerator. Red taillights glowed briefly in the rearview mirror before the swirling snow swallowed everything. The road curved into forest, and within seconds, the scene vanished completely. Gone. Done. Over. He exhaled slowly, feeling his heartbeat settle. His phone buzzed in the cup holder. Probably his brother wondering where he'd disappeared to. Liam ignored it. He'd figure out an alibi later. For now, he just needed distance. The highway unwound before him, empty and dark. Pine trees pressed close on either side, branches heavy with snow. No other vehicles. No houses. Nothing but wilderness and the certainty that he'd gotten away with it. Liam allowed himself a small smile. Nobody knew Noah was out here. Nobody was coming. He'd made sure of that. Behind him, Noah lay motionless on the frozen road. His phone was shattered 6 feet away, screen dark, useless. The temperature gauge on the nearest gas station read 28 degrees and dropping. In 90 minutes, hypothermia would claim him. In 2 hours, his heart would stop. Snow continued to fall. Soft. Relentless. Covering his body inch by inch. The road remained empty. Silent. The kind of silence that feels permanent. But something moved in that silence. Headlights appeared in the distance, not from the direction Liam had gone, but from behind. From the stretch of highway Noah had traveled before Liam forced him off the road. A black vehicle emerged from the darkness, moving slowly, deliberately. Not rushing. Not hesitant. The headlights swept across the abandoned road, catching the reflective markers, the snow-covered asphalt, the dark-shaped line crumpled on the frozen ground. The vehicle stopped 30 feet away. Engine idling. Headlights illuminating Noah's still form. For a long moment, nothing happened. Just the low rumble of the engine. The whisper of falling snow. The terrible stillness of an Omega dying alone. Then the driver's door opened. A man stepped out. Tall. Composed. Wearing a long black coat that hung open despite the cold. Dark hair. Sharp features. The kind of face that revealed nothing. He stood beside the vehicle, surveying the scene with the patience of someone who'd expected to find exactly this. Mateo Reyes had been following Liam's mistakes for months. Tonight, the mistakes had led here. He began walking toward Noah, boots crunching through snow. Not running. Not panicked. His movements carried the weight of inevitability, like watching a door close that had always been meant to shut. The headlights cast his shadow long across the road, stretching toward Noah's body. Steam rose from his breath. Snow collected on his shoulders. He stopped beside him, looking down at the unconscious Omega with an expression that might have been calculation, or might have been something harder to name. Noah's scent was barely perceptible through the cold, honey and something floral, muted by the freezing temperatures and the blood and the fear that still clung to his skin. But Mateo could smell it. The faint, fading sweetness of an Omega in distress. The kind of scent that made alphas want to protect. Or destroy. Mateo had never understood the impulse to destroy. He crouched down, pressing 2 fingers against Noah's neck. Pulse weak. Core temperature dropping fast. The Omega's lips were already turning blue, and his breathing was shallow, too shallow, the kind of breathing that preceded not breathing at all. Mateo's jaw tightened. He'd been tracking Liam for 3 months. Watching. Documenting. Waiting for the right moment to collect what was owed. Liam had been stealing from people Mateo protected. Skimming money from accounts he thought were invisible. Telling lies to dangerous men who didn't forgive being made fools of. Small crimes that added up to significant debt. But this, Mateo looked down at Noah's broken form, this was different. This wasn't about money or business or the careful mathematics of underworld justice. This was rage. This was personal. This was an alpha who'd lost control and left an omega to freeze because he was too much of a coward to face what he'd done. Mateo stood slowly, surveying the scene with professional detachment. Noah's shattered phone. The single sneaker lying separate from his body. The tire tracks where Liam's truck had turned around. The story wrote itself clearly for anyone trained to read violence. Liam hadn't planned this. The location was wrong, too exposed, too close to the main highway. This was improvisation born of anger, not calculation. Which meant Liam was panicking. Which meant he'd make more mistakes. Good. Mateo walked back to his vehicle, boots leaving deep prints in fresh snow. The black sedan idled quietly, headlights still illuminating Noah's body like a stage spotlight. He opened the rear door, retrieved his phone, and made a call. It was answered on the first ring. "I need a medical team," Mateo said without preamble. "Discreet. Head trauma, possible internal injuries, severe hypothermia. 20 minutes from my location or he doesn't make it." The voice on the other end asked no questions. Coordinates were given. ETA confirmed. Mateo ended the call and made a second one. "Find Liam Foster," he said. "Don't approach. Just watch. I want to know everywhere he goes, everyone he talks to, every mistake he makes between now and sunrise." He hung up before waiting for acknowledgement. Mateo returned to Noah's side, removed his coat, and laid it carefully over his body. The gesture was practical, body heat retention, slowing hypothermia, but something in the way he arranged it, ensuring Noah's face was covered from the falling snow, suggested a consideration that went beyond mere pragmatism. For several moments, he simply stood there. Hands in his pockets. Watching Noah's labored breathing. Snow collected on his shoulders, his dark hair, the sharp angles of his face. The cold didn't seem to touch him. He stood like a man accustomed to waiting in places others fled from. Noah stirred slightly. Not waking, but some deep survival instinct causing his body to shift. A soft sound escaped his throat, something between a whimper and a sigh. His fingers twitched beneath Mateo's coat. A wave of his scent, barely there, tinged with something else. Something that made Mateo's alpha instinct sit up and take notice. Fear. Pain. And underneath it, just barely, the faintest whisper of something warmer. Sweeter. The scent of an omega in distress calling out for comfort it didn't even know it was asking for. Mateo's jaw tightened. "Easy," he said quietly, though he knew Noah couldn't hear him. "Help is coming." He checked his watch. 17 minutes until the medical team arrived. 17 minutes to keep Noah alive. Mateo crouched again, this time gently repositioning Noah's head to keep his airway open. His hands were steady, efficient, the movements of someone who'd dealt with trauma before. He checked Noah's pupils with a small flashlight from his pocket. Sluggish response, but responsive. Checked his breathing, too shallow. Checked the blood on his temple, clotting, but the injury beneath was significant. Noah needed a hospital. Proper medical care. Warmth and time. And things Mateo couldn't provide alone on a frozen road. But hospitals meant police. Police meant questions. Questions meant investigations that could expose connections Mateo preferred to keep buried. He'd have to work around that. Movement caught his attention. Headlights in the distance, approaching from the south. Mateo's hand moved instinctively toward his waist, then relaxed. The vehicle slowed as it neared, a pickup truck with rusted panels and a cautious driver. It rolled to a stop 30 feet away. An older man climbed out, wearing a heavy coat and confusion. Everything okay here? Mateo stood, positioning himself between the stranger and Noah. Car accident. Help is already on the way. The man squinted through the snow, trying to see past Mateo. That Omega looks hurt. Maybe I should. Your help isn't needed. Mateo's voice remained level, but something in his tone, in the way he held himself, made the man take a step backward. Right. Okay. Just trying to help. I understand. Drive safe. The man hesitated, looked once more toward Noah's concealed form, then climbed back into his truck. He drove away slowly, glancing in his rearview mirror until the darkness swallowed him. Mateo waited until the taillights disappeared completely before returning his attention to Noah. 14 minutes. He knelt again, checking Noah's pulse. Weaker than before. His lips were turning blue despite the coat covering him. Mateo removed his suit jacket and added it to the layers over Noah's body. His dress shirt offered little protection against the cold, but he didn't seem to notice. Stay with me, he said, his voice quiet against the whisper of falling snow. Don't give him the satisfaction. Noah didn't respond. His breathing grew more labored, each inhale a visible effort. Mateo placed his hand against Noah's neck, monitoring his pulse with his fingers. It fluttered beneath his touch, fragile, fading. A life held together by threads that were fraying one by one. He'd seen men die before. Watched the light leave eyes. Felt the final breath rattle through broken bodies. He'd caused some of those deaths himself, when circumstances demanded and mercy ran out. But this was different. Noah hadn't earned this death. Hadn't played the games that led men to frozen roads and final reckonings. He was collateral damage in Liam's spiral toward consequence, and Mateo didn't allow collateral damage. Not anymore. 11 minutes. In the distance, barely audible over the wind, came the sound of approaching sirens. Noah's first thought wasn't pain. It was cold. The kind of cold that felt like drowning. Like being pulled under dark water where sound became distant and movement turned sluggish. He tried to open his eyes but couldn't remember how. Tried to move, but his body had become something foreign, disconnected, refusing every command. Somewhere far away, he heard breathing. His own. Someone else's. He couldn't tell. Snow touched his face. Soft. Persistent. Melting against skin that barely registered sensation anymore. Each tiny impact felt like a whisper telling him to let go, to sink deeper into the numbness spreading through his limbs. His mind grasped for something solid, a memory, a reason to fight. Liam's face twisted with rage. His fist connecting. The world tilting. Asphalt rushing up. The memory arrived fragmented, edges blurred. He'd been leaving. Finally leaving. 3 years of walking on eggshells. 3 years of apologizing for things that weren't his fault. 3 years of watching himself shrink smaller and smaller until he barely recognized the man in the mirror. Tonight, he tried to take himself back. I'm done protecting your secrets, Liam. He'd said it standing in his doorway, car keys in hand, overnight bag already packed. He'd said it because he thought he was safe. Thought Liam wouldn't follow. Thought the restraining order he'd filed that afternoon would matter. He'd been wrong about all of it. Noah's lungs burned with each shallow breath. Something inside his chest felt broken, grinding against itself. Ribs, probably. Maybe worse. He'd taken a first aid course once, years ago, back when he still believed knowledge could save you. Back when he thought being careful meant being safe. Flail chest. Punctured lung. Internal bleeding. The terms floated through his consciousness like debris from a shipwreck. He tried to move his left arm. Nothing. The signals from his brain died somewhere between intention and execution. His body had stopped listening. Stopped cooperating. Stopped caring whether he survived the next 60 seconds. Panic fluttered weakly in his chest, a bird with broken wings. Move. Get up. Crawl. Do something. But his muscles wouldn't respond. He was trapped inside himself. A passenger in a vehicle careening toward oblivion with no way to grab the wheel. The cold intensified. He'd grown up in Minnesota winters, knew the progression. Numbness first, his fingers and toes already gone, sensation retreating inward like his body was abandoning its extremities to save the core. Then the shivering would come, violent and uncontrollable. Then confusion. Then the final stage, the cruel warmth that made hypothermia victims strip naked before they died, convinced they were burning up as their bodies shut down. He wondered which stage he was in now. Wondered if he'd feel himself cross into the last one. Noah's thoughts drifted to his apartment. Small. Cluttered with half-finished paintings. Smelling of turpentine and coffee. He'd been working on a series about metamorphosis, butterflies emerging from cocoons. The irony wasn't lost on him. He'd spent months painting transformation while trapped in a relationship that was slowly killing who he used to be. Who was I before him? He couldn't remember anymore. Liam had taken so much. His confidence. His friends. His sense of safety in the world. He'd done it slowly, methodically, the way water erodes stone. By the time Noah realized what was happening, he'd already lost pieces of himself he couldn't name. And now Liam had taken the rest. Somewhere in the distance, a sound. An engine, maybe. Or wind through trees. Noah's fading consciousness couldn't distinguish between real and imagined anymore. Everything blurred together, memory and sensation, past and present, fear and acceptance. He thought about his mother. Dead for 15 years. Wondered if this was how it felt at the end, this strange peace settling over terror. His mother had gone quietly, cancer stealing her breath inch by inch until there was nothing left to take. I'm sorry, Mom. I should have been stronger. But what good was strength against alphas like Liam? Alphas who smiled in public and raged in private. Alphas who apologized with flowers and promises before their fists found skin again. Alphas who made you believe you deserved every bruise, every cruel word, every moment of fear. Noah had tried to be strong. Tried to leave 6 times before tonight. Each time, Liam had found a way to pull him back, threats, tears, promises of change that lasted exactly long enough for Noah to unpack his bags. This time, Noah hadn't told him he was leaving. Hadn't given him the chance to manipulate or threaten. He'd filed the restraining order, packed his car, and driven. Liam had found him anyway. Because alphas like Liam always did. Noah's breathing grew shallower. The pain in his side dulled into something almost bearable, not because it had lessened, but because his body was running out of ways to register suffering. Everything was shutting down. Systems failing one by one, like lights going dark in a house nobody lived in anymore. This is how I die, Noah thought distantly. Alone on a frozen road because I finally tried to save myself. The injustice of it should have made him angry. Should have ignited some spark of rage, some final burst of will to survive. But he was so tired. Tired of fighting. Tired of being afraid. Tired of carrying the weight of Liam's violence like it was something he'd earned. Maybe it was easier to let go. Maybe the cold was a mercy. Snow accumulated on his eyelashes, his hair, the corner of his mouth. His breath came in barely there whispers. The road stretched empty and endless, and Noah felt himself slipping away from it. From everything. Into darkness that promised an end to hurting. Then, footsteps. Close. Real. Crunching through snow with deliberate weight. Not running. Not panicked. Noah's dying consciousness registered the sound but couldn't process its meaning. Couldn't separate hope from hallucination. His brain was shutting down, inventing comfort where none existed. The footsteps stopped. Someone knelt beside him. And in that moment between life and death, Noah sensed something impossible. He wasn't alone anymore. Mateo didn't believe in coincidence. He believed in patterns. In consequences. In the inevitable collision between actions taken and debts owed. He believed that alphas like Liam always left trails, sloppy, arrogant trails, because they never imagined anyone was watching closely enough to follow. Liam had been wrong about that. Mateo knelt beside Noah's unconscious body, his coat brushing snow-covered asphalt. Up close, the damage was worse than he'd expected. Noah's face was swollen on the left side, purple bruising already blooming across his cheekbone. Blood had dried in his dark hair, matting it against his skull. His breathing was shallow, irregular, the kind of breathing that preceded not breathing at all. Mateo pressed 2 fingers against his neck. Pulse weak but present. Core temperature dropping fast. Maybe 30 minutes before irreversible damage. Maybe less. He'd been tracking Liam for 3 months. Watching. Documenting. Waiting for the right moment to collect what was owed. Liam had been stealing from people Mateo protected, skimming money from accounts he thought were invisible, telling lies to dangerous men who didn't forgive being made fools of. Small crimes that added up to significant debt. But this, Mateo looked down at Noah's broken form, this was different. This wasn't about money or business or the careful mathematics of underworld justice. This was rage. This was personal. This was an alpha who'd lost control and left an omega to freeze because he was too much of a coward to face what he'd done. Mateo stood slowly, surveying the scene with professional detachment. Noah's shattered phone. The single shoe lying separate from his body. The tire tracks where Liam's truck had turned around. The story wrote itself clearly for anyone trained to read violence. Liam hadn't planned this. The location was wrong, too exposed, too close to the main highway. This was improvisation born of anger, not calculation. Which meant Liam was panicking. Which meant he'd make more mistakes. Good. Mateo walked back to his vehicle, boots leaving deep prints in fresh snow. The black sedan idled quietly, headlights still illuminating Noah's body like a stage spotlight. He opened the rear door, retrieved his phone, and made a call. It was answered on the first ring. "I need a medical team," Mateo said without preamble. Discreet. Head trauma, possible internal injuries, severe hypothermia. 20 minutes from my location or he doesn't make it. The voice on the other end asked no questions. Coordinates were given. ETA confirmed. Mateo ended the call and made a second one. "Find Liam Foster," he said. "Don't approach. Just watch. I want to know everywhere he goes, everyone he talks to, every mistake he makes between now and sunrise." He hung up before waiting for acknowledgement. Mateo returned to Noah's side, removed his coat, and laid it carefully over his body. The gesture was practical, body heat retention, slowing hypothermia, but something in the way he arranged it, ensuring Noah's face was covered from the falling snow, suggested a consideration that went beyond mere pragmatism. For several moments, he simply stood there. Hands in his pockets. Watching Noah's labored breathing. Snow collected on his shoulders, his dark hair, the sharp angles of his face. The cold didn't seem to touch him. He stood like a man accustomed to waiting in places others fled from. Noah stirred slightly. Not waking, but some deep survival instinct causing his body to shift. A soft sound escaped his throat, something between a whimper and a sigh. His fingers twitched beneath Mateo's coat. "Easy," Mateo said quietly, though he knew Noah couldn't hear him. "Help is coming." He checked his watch. 17 minutes until the medical team arrived. 17 minutes to keep Noah alive. Mateo crouched again, this time gently repositioning Noah's head to keep his airway open. His hands were steady, efficient, the movements of someone who'd dealt with trauma before. He checked Noah's pupils with a small flashlight from his pocket. Sluggish response, but responsive. Checked his breathing, too shallow. Checked the blood on his temple, clotting, but the injury beneath was significant. Noah needed a hospital. Proper medical care. Warmth and time. And things Mateo couldn't provide alone on a frozen road. But hospitals meant police. Police meant questions. Questions meant investigations that could expose connections Mateo preferred to keep buried. He'd have to work around that. Movement caught his attention. Headlights in the distance, approaching from the south. Mateo's hand moved instinctively toward his waist, then relaxed. The vehicle slowed as it neared, a pickup truck with rusted panels and a cautious driver. It rolled to a stop 30 feet away. An older man climbed out, wearing a heavy coat and confusion. "Everything okay here?" Mateo stood, positioning himself between the stranger and Noah. "Car accident. Help is already on the way." The man squinted through the snow, trying to see past Mateo. "That Omega looks hurt. Maybe I should. Your help isn't needed." Mateo's voice remained level, but something in his tone, in the way he held himself, made the man take a step backward. "Right. Okay. Just trying to help. I understand. Drive safe." The man hesitated, looked once more toward Noah's concealed form, then climbed back into his truck. He drove away slowly, glancing in his rearview mirror until the darkness swallowed him. Mateo waited until the taillights disappeared completely before returning his attention to Noah. 14 minutes. He knelt again, checking Noah's pulse. Weaker than before. His lips were turning blue despite the coat covering him. Mateo removed his suit jacket and added it to the layers over Noah's body. His dress shirt offered little protection against the cold, but he didn't seem to notice. "Stay with me," he said, his voice quiet against the whisper of falling snow. "Don't give him the satisfaction." Noah didn't respond. His breathing grew more labored, each inhale a visible effort. Mateo placed his hand against Noah's neck, monitoring his pulse with his fingers. It fluttered beneath his touch, fragile, fading. A life held together by threads that were fraying one by one. He'd seen men die before. Watched the light leave eyes. Felt the final breath rattle through broken bodies. He'd caused some of those deaths himself, when circumstances demanded and mercy ran out. But this was different. Noah hadn't earned this death. Hadn't played the games that led men to frozen roads and final reckonings. He was collateral damage in Liam's spiral toward consequence, and Mateo didn't allow collateral damage. Not anymore. 11 minutes. In the distance, barely audible over the wind, came the sound of approaching sirens. Liam Foster made it 37 miles before his hands stopped shaking. He drove through the darkness with his headlights cutting tunnels through falling snow. Radio off. Heat blasting. Mind racing through the details. Alibi first. Then clean up. Then the careful performance of normalcy that would carry him through the questions that might never come. Because nobody knew. Nobody saw. He'd made sure of that. Liam pulled into a truck stop off Highway 61, parking beneath flickering fluorescent lights that turned the snow purple. Inside, he'd grab coffee. Maybe food. Establish a timeline that placed him nowhere near that frozen road. His phone showed 1:14 a.m. Perfect. He'd say he'd been driving all night, heading to Duluth for a weekend fishing trip. Nobody could prove otherwise. He climbed out of his truck, stretching muscles still tight with adrenaline. The parking lot was mostly empty, a semi idling in the corner, a sedan with Minnesota plates, a motorcycle covered in snow. Normal. Quiet. Liam walked toward the entrance, rehearsing his story. Then he stopped. A black vehicle sat in the shadows near the exit. Engine running. Headlights off. The kind of car that cost more than Liam made in a year. The kind that didn't belong at a truck stop in the middle of nowhere. Probably nothing. Rich guys stopping for gas. Wrong turn. Liam continued toward the door. Liam Foster. The voice came from behind him. Calm. Measured. Carrying the weight of someone accustomed to being heard. Liam turned. A man stood beside the black sedan, tall and composed in the falling snow. Dark hair. Sharp features. Expensive clothes that somehow looked wrong in the fluorescent glare, too refined, too intentional. He wore a dress shirt despite the cold, no coat, like the temperature was merely a suggestion he'd chosen to ignore. Do I know you? Liam kept his voice casual, but his heart rate kicked up. The man walked closer, movements unhurried. No. But I know you. Something in those words made Liam's stomach drop. Not the words themselves, but the certainty behind them. The kind of certainty that came from knowledge, not assumption. Look, I don't know what you. You left Noah Bennett on Route 47. The man stopped 6 feet away. Approximately 40 minutes ago. You checked his pulse, confirmed he was alive, and left him to freeze. Liam's blood went cold. Colder than the night air. Colder than the fear crystallizing in his chest. I don't know what you're talking about. The lie came automatically, but it sounded hollow even to his own ears. The man tilted his head slightly, studying Liam the way someone might study an insect pinned to a board. Your hands are bruised. Your right sleeve has blood on the cuff. You're 20 miles past your apartment, driving in the wrong direction. And your story about Duluth won't hold because you didn't pack fishing gear. Liam looked down at his hands. Knuckles purple and swollen. At his sleeve, dark stain he'd somehow missed. Evidence he'd been too arrogant or too stupid to notice. Who the hell are you? Mateo Reyes. The name landed like a punch. Liam had heard it before. Whispered in bars. Mentioned in careful conversations by men who dealt in cash and favors. Stories about an alpha who moved through the underworld like smoke, who settled debts quietly and permanently, who never needed to raise his voice because his reputation did the screaming for him. Stories Liam had dismissed as exaggeration. Urban legends told by small-time criminals trying to sound dangerous. Looking at Mateo Reyes now, in the flesh, Liam understood every story had been an understatement. I didn't. Liam's mind scrambled for traction. Whatever you think happened. I think you've been stealing from the Bellamy accounts for 6 months. Mateo's voice remained conversational. I think you've been skimming profits from deliveries you were trusted to transport. I think you've been telling lies about people who don't forgive being lied about. Liam's throat went dry. The Bellamy accounts. Christ. He'd been so careful. Taking only small amounts. Covering his tracks. How did And tonight, Mateo continued, I think you decided Noah Bennett knew too much about your business. So you eliminated the problem. He's my ex-boyfriend, not. He passed information to an accountant 3 weeks ago. Mateo's expression didn't change. Copies of invoices you thought he'd forgotten about. Details about shipments that didn't match manifests. He didn't know what he was giving away. But you did. That's why you followed him tonight. That's why you panicked. Liam felt the world tilting beneath his feet. Noah had talked to an accountant. Given away his paperwork. When? How? I want you to understand something, Mateo said, taking one step closer. I've been watching you for months, Liam. Watching you steal. Watching you lie. Watching you make enemies of people who take enemies very seriously. I've been patient because the debt you owe takes time to calculate properly. Another step. But tonight, you hurt someone who had nothing to do with your crimes. Someone who was only guilty of knowing you. And that, Mateo's voice dropped lower, quieter, somehow more terrifying in its restraint, changes everything. Liam's hand moved toward his pocket, keys, phone, anything, but Mateo's gaze stopped him cold. If you run, I'll find you before sunrise. If you call the police, I'll ensure they discover every crime you've committed since you turned 18. If you try to finish what you started with Noah, Mateo paused, letting the implication hang in the frozen air, you won't get close enough to try. What do you want? Liam's voice cracked. I want you to understand that this story is over. Your version ends here. What happens next depends entirely on whether Noah Bennett lives or dies. Is he? Liam stopped himself, but too late. Mateo smiled, but it was the kind of smile that made Liam's skin crawl. You're wondering if he's alive? If someone found him? If your mistake is reversible? He took one final step, close enough that Liam could see the absolute coldness in his eyes. He's alive, Liam. Despite everything you did to make sure he wasn't. And now you're going to live with what comes next. Mateo turned, walking back toward his vehicle with the same unhurried confidence he'd approached with. Where are you going? Liam called out, his voice desperate. Mateo opened his car door, looked back over his shoulder. To watch you understand what consequence feels like. Then he was gone. The black sedan pulling away into darkness, leaving Liam Foster standing alone under fluorescent lights with blood on his sleeve and the weight of his mistakes finally catching up. The medical team arrived without sirens. 2 vehicles, a dark SUV and an unmarked van, pulling onto the frozen road with practiced efficiency. 4 people emerged. 2 paramedics, a doctor, and someone Mateo recognized as one of Dr. Keller's trauma specialists from the private clinic downtown. No questions asked. No paperwork. No official records that would trigger investigations. Exactly as Mateo had requested. How long? Dr. Keller knelt beside Noah, already assessing vitals with swift, practiced movements. 43 minutes since I found him, Mateo said. Pulse weakening. Breathing shallow. Core temperature critical. Dr. Keller worked quickly. 4-line inserted. Heated blankets wrapped. Oxygen mask secured. His team moved like choreographed dancers, each person knowing their role without needing direction. Possible skull fracture, multiple rib fractures, internal bleeding likely. Dr. Keller looked up at Mateo. He needs surgery soon. Can he be moved? He'll die if we don't. Mateo nodded. Take him to your facility. Keep him off the grid. No police notifications until I say otherwise. Dr. Keller hesitated. If he doesn't make it. He will. Mateo's voice carried absolute certainty, as if he could will it into being. Make sure of it. They loaded Noah into the van with mechanical precision. Mateo watched until the vehicles disappeared into the darkness, red taillights swallowed by falling snow. Then he stood alone on the empty road, studying the scene Liam had left behind. Blood on asphalt. Tire tracks. A single shoe. The shattered phone. Evidence of violence. Evidence of abandonment. Evidence of an alpha who thought he could erase someone and walk away clean. Mateo retrieved the phone, careful not to disturb the screen fragments. Even damaged, it might yield information. Messages. Call logs. The digital footprint people never remembered they left behind. His own phone vibrated. He answered. Talk. Liam's at the Pine Ridge truck stop off 61. The voice belonged to James, one of Mateo's surveillance specialists. He's been standing in the parking lot for 6 minutes. Looks spooked. I know. I just left him. Silence on the other end. Then, you talked to him. I wanted him to know. Mateo walked back to his sedan, phone pressed to his ear. I wanted him to understand this wasn't random. That someone's been watching. That consequence has a name. Risky move, boss. Liam Foster is a coward who hits omegas and steals from people he thinks won't notice. He's not smart enough to be dangerous. Mateo climbed into his car. But I need everything on him. Not just the Bellamy accounts. Everything. Who he talks to, who he owes, where his money goes. And I need to know exactly how Noah Bennett became involved. Already working on it. Found something interesting about 3 weeks ago. Noah visited Mueller and Associates downtown. Accounting firm. He was there 90 minutes. Mateo's jaw tightened. Why? Still digging. But Mueller handles the Bellamy portfolio, and they've been flagging irregularities in Liam's shipment records for months. The pieces started connecting. Noah hadn't been just Liam's ex-boyfriend. He'd been his liability. The person who could unknowingly expose his crimes simply by answering questions honestly. Find out what he told them, Mateo said. Every detail. On it. Also, Liam's brother called him twice in the last hour. Left voicemails. Want me to pull the audio? Yes. And put eyes on the brother. If Liam runs to family, I want to know. Mateo ended the call and sat in the darkness, engine idling, heat blasting against the cold. His mind worked through scenarios, calculating probabilities, anticipating Liam's next moves. Liam would panic. Alphas like him always did when they realized the walls were closing in. He'd either run, stupid but predictable, or he'd try to cover his tracks by eliminating evidence. Which meant Noah needed protection even after he woke up. If he woke up. Mateo pushed the thought away. Dr. Keller was the best trauma surgeon in the state. Discreet and expensive. If anyone could save Noah, it was him. His phone buzzed again. A text from an unknown number. Package delivered. He's in surgery. Will update in 3 hours. Package. As if Noah were cargo instead of an omega bleeding out because he'd made the mistake of trusting the wrong alpha. Mateo opened his contacts, found a name he hadn't called in months. The line rang 3 times before connecting. Reyes. The voice was rough, heavy with sleep. Do you know what time it is? I need everything on Noah Bennett. 28 years old, artist, lives on Riverside. Last known employment at the Copper Gallery downtown. Why? Detective Hayes sounded more awake now, suspicious. Because he's in my protection now. And I need to know who he is beyond what Liam Foster tried to destroy. Silence. Then, Foster. That piece of work who's been running deliveries for the Bellamy operation. The same. What did he do? What alphas like him always do. Mateo's voice was flat. He took his anger out on someone smaller. Someone who trusted him. Someone who couldn't fight back. Hayes exhaled slowly. Where is he now? Surgery. Off the books. If he survives, he'll need protection. Foster knows he talked to Mueller and Associates. Knows he can connect him to the irregularities in the Bellamy accounts. Christ. He stumbled into the middle of your investigation. He didn't stumble. He was used. Mateo watched snow accumulate on his windshield. Liam thought he was just his ex-boyfriend. Thought he'd keep his secrets because that's what victims do. But he didn't. He talked. And tonight, Liam tried to erase that mistake. You want me to bring him in? Not yet. I want him scared. I want him making mistakes. I want him to understand that running won't save him, and neither will silence. Reyes. Hayes's tone shifted, cautionary. Whatever you're planning. I'm planning to make sure Noah Bennett wakes up in a world where Liam Foster can't touch him again. Everything else is just logistics. The snow continued falling, covering the blood on the road, erasing the evidence of violence the way time erases everything eventually. But Mateo remembered. He catalogued every detail, the position of Noah's body, the defensive wounds on his hands, the shoe lying separate like a marker of struggle. Liam had made this personal when he left Noah to die. Now Mateo would show him what personal really meant. Liam Foster sat in his truck for 27 minutes before he found the courage to move. His hands gripped the steering wheel, knuckles white, mind replaying Mateo Reyes's words on an endless loop. He's alive. Despite everything you did to make sure he wasn't. Alive meant witnesses. Alive meant testimony. Alive meant every lie Liam planned to tell would crumble the moment Noah opened his mouth. He needed to think. Needed to fix this before it spiraled further out of control. Liam pulled out his phone, stared at the screen, then put it away. Who could he call? His brother would ask too many questions. His friends were liabilities. The people he worked for, the Bellamy operation, they'd kill him themselves if they knew how badly he'd screwed up. He was alone with his mistakes. And they were multiplying faster than he could contain them. The smart move was to run. Empty his bank accounts, drive south, disappear into a city where nobody knew his name. Start over. Forget Noah. Forget the Bellamy money. Forget everything that had led to this frozen parking lot and the realization that he'd gambled his life on a hand he couldn't win. But running meant admitting defeat. Running meant Mateo Reyes won. Liam's jaw clenched. He started the engine. Mateo stood beside Route 47, exactly where Noah had fallen. Waiting. The snow had stopped. The sky was clearing, revealing stars that turned the landscape into something almost beautiful, if you could forget the violence that had happened here hours earlier. The blood was covered now, buried under fresh powder. By morning, there would be no visible trace of what Liam had done. But Mateo didn't need visible traces. He checked his watch. 3:47 a.m. Liam had left the truck stop 18 minutes ago, driving east. James was tracking him remotely, watching his movements through GPS and traffic cameras, feeding coordinates to Mateo in real time. Updates, Liam's heading back toward the city. Speed increasing. He's running. Mateo's phone buzzed with the message. He smiled without humor. Not running. Not yet. Liam was the kind of alpha who needed to see something, to confirm it with his own eyes, before he believed it was real. He'd come back to the road. He'd check whether Noah's body was still there. Whether evidence remained. Whether the story he tried to write had actually ended. Mateo knew alphas like Liam. Knew their patterns. Knew how predictability made them easy to corner. Another text, he's turning on to 47. Heading your direction. Perfect. Mateo walked back to his sedan, killed the headlights, and positioned the vehicle across the road, not blocking it entirely, but creating an obstacle impossible to ignore. Then he stepped out and waited in the shadows, letting the darkness swallow him. 3 minutes later, headlights appeared in the distance. Liam's truck approached slowly, cautiously. He slowed further when he saw the sedan, coming to a full stop 50 feet away. The engine idled. Liam didn't get out. Mateo stepped into the road, illuminated by the truck's headlights. Liam's brake lights flared brighter, fight or flight instinct kicking in. Then the driver's door opened. Liam climbed out, trying to look confident, trying to reclaim some illusion of control. "You following me now?" Liam called out, voice carrying false bravado. "No. I'm waiting for you." Mateo walked closer. "I knew you'd come back. Men like you always do. You need to see the scene. Need to confirm the story ended the way you wanted." Liam's hands clenched into fists. "I don't know what game you're. This isn't a game, Liam. This is consequence." Mateo gestured to the empty road. "You came back to check whether Noah's body was still here. Whether anyone found him. Whether the cold did what your fists couldn't. You're insane." "I'm precise." Mateo stopped 10 feet away. "I chose this location specifically. No traffic at night. No witnesses. No security cameras within 3 miles. The nearest house is 4 miles east. If someone screamed here, nobody would hear them." Liam took a step backward. "Are you threatening me?" "I'm explaining context." Mateo's voice remained level, conversational. "You thought this road was empty by coincidence. It wasn't. I've been directing your movements for weeks, Liam. The jobs you took. The routes you drove. The people you trusted. All of it calculated to bring you here. To this moment. Where you finally understand how thoroughly you've been outmaneuvered." The color drained from Liam's face. "That's not possible. The delivery to Cloak 2 weeks ago, I arranged it. The late-night pickup last Thursday, mine. The accountant Noah visited," Mateo smiled coldly. "I sent him there. Gave him just enough information to ask the right questions without understanding why." Liam staggered slightly, as if the ground beneath him had shifted. "You used him. I protected him. There's a difference." Mateo's expression hardened. "You were stealing from people who don't forgive theft. I needed proof. Noah provided it without knowing. He was safe, until you made him a target. I didn't. You beat him unconscious and left him to die." Mateo's voice cut through the night like a blade. "Don't insult us both by pretending otherwise." Liam's breathing quickened. His eyes darted around the empty road, calculating odds, measuring distances. Mateo could see the desperation building, the moment when cornered animals stopped thinking and started clawing. "Sit down, Liam." "What?" "Sit down." Mateo pointed to the ground. "Right there. In the snow." "I'm not." Mateo moved. Not running. Not rushing. Just closing the distance with frightening speed. Liam tried to react, tried to raise his hands, but Mateo's palm struck his chest, precise, controlled, and Liam's legs buckled. He dropped to his knees in the snow, gasping. I said sit. Mateo stood over him. You're going to stay right there while I explain exactly what happens next. Liam looked up, fear finally replacing arrogance in his eyes. Noah is alive, Mateo continued. He's in surgery. If he dies, you die. Not quickly. Not mercifully. You die the way you made him suffer, slowly, in the cold, knowing nobody's coming to save you. Please. If he lives, you answer for everything. The theft. The violence. The lies. You confess to the Bellamy operation. You return every cent you stole. You disappear from Noah's life so completely he forgets you existed. They'll kill me if I confess. Yes. Mateo crouched down, eye level with Liam. But that's better than what I'll do if you run. Because, Liam, his voice dropped to barely above a whisper. I will always find you. Always. And when I do, you'll wish you'd taken your chances with them. Headlights appeared in the distance. 2 vehicles approaching from the east. Liam's eyes widened. Who's that? People who've been waiting for permission to collect what you owe. Mateo stood. This is the moment, Liam. The moment you decide whether you die a coward, or whether you face what you've earned. The vehicles stopped. Doors opened. 3 men emerged, large, silent, purposeful. Liam looked up at Mateo, all pretense finally stripped away. What did you do? I balanced the scales. Mateo walked toward his sedan. Everything else is just gravity. The 3 men moved like shadows given substance, deliberate, unhurried, carrying the weight of professional violence barely contained beneath pressed suits and impassive expressions. Liam recognized one of them. Victor Bellamy's enforcer. The alpha who handled problems too delicate for police involvement. Problems like theft. Like betrayal. Like loose ends that talked too much. Liam tried to stand, but his legs wouldn't cooperate. Fear had locked his muscles, turned his bones to water. Wait. Mateo. Please. We can work this out. Mateo paused at his sedan, hand on the door. He didn't turn around. You had months to work it out, Liam. Every day you stole. Every lie you told. Every time you chose cowardice over accountability. Those were opportunities. You spent them all. I'll confess. I'll tell them everything. I'll return the money. Yes, you will. Mateo finally looked back, his face illuminated by the sedan's interior light. But not because I'm giving you a choice. Because it's the only path left that doesn't end with your body feeding the woods before sunrise. The enforcer, a broad alpha with Slavic features and hands like concrete blocks, stopped in front of Liam. He didn't speak. Didn't need to. His presence said everything words couldn't. Liam's breath came in ragged gasps. This isn't fair. Fair? For the first time, emotion cracked through Mateo's controlled facade. You beat an Omega unconscious. Left him bleeding in the snow. Hoped the cold would erase your mistakes like he was nothing more than an inconvenient witness. And you want to talk about fair? Mateo walked back toward Liam, each step measured, controlled, dangerous. The 3 men parted to let him through. He crouched down again, close enough that Liam could see the absolute coldness in his eyes. The kind of cold that had nothing to do with temperature and everything to do with the absence of mercy. I've killed alphas, Liam. Alphas who deserved it less than you do. Alphas who made cleaner mistakes, who showed more courage, who faced their consequences without begging. Mateo's voice was barely above a whisper, forcing Liam to strain to hear. "Do you want to know why you're still breathing?" Liam nodded frantically. "Because Noah Bennett is still breathing. Because somewhere in a surgical suite, a doctor is fighting to keep his heart beating, his lungs working, his brain functioning, despite everything you did to stop them. His survival is the only thing standing between you and a shallow grave." Mateo stood, brushing snow from his knees. "So here's what happens now. You're going to get in that vehicle." He pointed to the black SUV idling behind the three men. "You're going to drive to the Bellamy warehouse. You're going to confess every theft, every lie, every cut you skimmed from their operations. You're going to return every cent you can access and sign over everything you own to cover the rest." "They'll kill me." "Probably." Mateo's expression didn't change. "But Victor Bellamy is a businessman first. He might decide your debt can be worked off. Might decide you're worth more alive than dead. That's between you and him. And if I refuse?" Mateo glanced at the enforcer, then back to Liam. "Then you don't leave this road. And tomorrow, when hunters find your truck abandoned with blood on the steering wheel, everyone will assume you ran. Assumed guilt caught up with you. Assumed the cold or the wolves or simple cowardice finally claimed you." The enforcer's hand moved to his waist, where something metallic glinted in the starlight. "Choose, Liam." Mateo watched the SUV pull away, taillights receding into darkness. The third man, younger, sharper dressed, remained behind. "What do you want me to do with his truck?" he asked. "Leave it. Let the police find it here. Let them wonder why Liam Foster abandoned his vehicle on a road where his ex-boyfriend nearly died." Mateo climbed into his sedan. Sometimes the questions are more useful than the answers. The man nodded and disappeared into a second vehicle, a dark sedan identical to Mateo's own. Within seconds, the road was empty again, except for Liam's abandoned truck, headlights still burning, driver's door hanging open like a question mark. Mateo sat in his car, engine off, darkness pressing against the windows. His phone buzzed. A message from Dr. Keller. "Surgery complete. Critical but stable. Next 48 hours will determine recovery. Critical but stable. Medical terminology for not dead yet." Mateo closed his eyes, feeling the tension he'd been carrying finally catch up with him. He'd been running on calculated fury for hours, moving pieces across a board only he could see, orchestrating consequences with surgical precision. But now, in the silence, he allowed himself one moment of something that might have been concern. Noah Bennett hadn't asked to be involved in his investigation. Hadn't volunteered to become bait for Liam's panic. He was collateral in a war between criminals, an innocent caught in machinery designed to grind people like him into dust. And yet he'd survived. Despite Liam's fists. Despite the cold. Despite the odds stacked against him by geography and timing and the simple cruelty of alphas who thought violence solved problems. He'd survived because Mateo had been watching. Because he'd anticipated Liam's breaking point. Because he'd positioned himself exactly where consequence needed to arrive. But that didn't erase his responsibility. Didn't change the fact that his investigation had painted a target on Noah's back. Didn't absolve him of the role he'd played in bringing Noah to that frozen road. Another message from Dr. Keller. He's asking for someone. Disoriented but conscious. Needs familiar face. Mateo stared at the text. Noah didn't know him. Wouldn't recognize his face or voice. Wouldn't understand why a stranger in expensive clothes sat beside his hospital bed making promises about safety. He typed a reply, contact his emergency contacts. Family. Friends. Anyone he trusts. The response came quickly. Already tried. Parents deceased. No siblings. Friends not answering at 4 a.m. You're all he has right now. Mateo sat with that information, feeling its weight. Noah Bennett, isolated by Liam's abuse, disconnected from support systems, alone in the world except for the alpha who'd used him as an unwitting informant. He started his engine. The drive to Dr. Keller's private clinic took 23 minutes. Mateo spent them composing explanations that felt inadequate. How do you tell someone they nearly died because you needed evidence? How do you apologize for consequences you'd anticipated but failed to prevent? You don't, Mateo realized. You just make sure it never happens again. He pulled into the clinic's underground garage, parked, and walked toward the elevator that would take him to Noah Bennett's room. Toward the Omega whose survival had saved Liam Foster's life. Toward the Omega Mateo had promised to protect, even if he never understood why. The hallway smelled like antiseptic and something else. Copper, maybe. Or fear. Mateo walked past empty rooms with darkened windows, his footsteps echoing against tile floors. Dr. Keller's clinic occupied the third floor of a building that officially housed medical offices and unofficially treated patients who couldn't afford questions. Room 307. Door half open. Lights dimmed. Mateo paused outside, listening. Steady beeping of monitors. The mechanical whisper of oxygen. Someone breathing, shallow, labored, but alive. He pushed the door open. Noah Bennett lay in the hospital bed, looking impossibly small beneath white sheets and medical equipment. His face was swollen beyond recognition, purple bruises blooming across his left cheekbone, bandages wrapped around his skull, one eye sealed shut from trauma. And 4 drip ran into his arm. Oxygen tubes snaked beneath his nose. Monitors tracked his heartbeat in irregular patterns that made Mateo's jaw tighten. This was what Liam's fists had created. This was the consequence of rage given permission to destroy. Dr. Keller stood beside the bed, reviewing charts. He looked up when Mateo entered, exhaustion written across his features. He's stable. For now. Prognosis. Skull fracture, grade 2 concussion, 4 broken ribs, punctured lung, severe hypothermia. Dr. Keller rattled off injuries like grocery items. I've repaired what I could. The rest depends on him. Whether he fights. Whether his body decides survival is worth the effort. Mateo moved closer to the bed, studying Noah's battered face. You said he was conscious. Briefly. Disoriented. He asked where he was. Who hurt him? Whether he was safe. Dr. Keller paused. Then he asked if Liam was coming back. Something cold settled in Mateo's chest. Even unconscious, even broken, Noah's first fear was the alpha who'd put him here. What did you tell him? That he was safe. That no one could reach him here. Dr. Keller closed the chart. I didn't mention you. Didn't know how to explain a stranger orchestrating his protection. Good. Mateo pulled a chair beside the bed, sat down. When he wakes again, I'll explain. Will you tell him the truth? Some of it. Dr. Keller watched him for a long moment. You feel responsible. It wasn't a question. Mateo didn't answer. He would have died without your intervention. Dr. Keller continued. The hypothermia alone, another 15 minutes and his core temperature would have dropped past recovery. You saved his life, Reyes. I painted the target. Mateo's voice was flat. Liam attacked him because he unknowingly gave me information. Because I manipulated him into becoming useful. Because I needed evidence more than I needed his safety. You couldn't have known Liam would snap. I knew what kind of alpha he was. I knew his history with Noah. I knew men like Liam don't let go quietly. Mateo leaned forward, elbows on knees. I calculated the risk and decided it was acceptable. I was wrong. The monitors beeped steadily, filling the silence between them. Noah stirred, a small movement, barely perceptible. His unbandaged eye fluttered open, unfocused, struggling to make sense of ceiling tiles and fluorescent lights. His lips moved, trying to form words around the oxygen tubes. Mateo stood immediately. Noah. You're safe. You're in a medical facility. Noah's eye tracked toward his voice, vision clearing slowly. He stared at Mateo, confusion mixing with fear, mixing with something that might have been recognition, though they'd never met. Who? His voice was barely a whisper, damaged by cold and trauma. My name is Mateo Reyes. I found you on Route 47. You were hurt. I brought you here. Noah's breathing quickened. The monitors responded, heart rate climbing. Liam isn't coming. Can't come. You're protected. Noah tried to sit up, failed, gasped at the pain that movement triggered. Mateo placed a gentle hand on his shoulder, keeping him still. Don't move. You have broken ribs, a punctured lung. Moving will make it worse. Tears leaked from Noah's open eye, tracking down bruised skin. He found me. I tried to leave, and he found me. I know. Noah's voice cracked. He said no one would come. That I'd freeze. That it was my fault for talking too much. He lied. Mateo's voice was steady, anchoring. Someone did come. I came. And you didn't freeze. You survived. Noah stared at him, trying to process information through pain, medication, and trauma. Why? Why would you? How did you even? Because I was already watching Liam. Following his mistakes. Documenting his crimes. You became involved accidentally, and I failed to protect you from the consequences. Mateo met Noah's gaze directly. I'm sorry. The apology seemed to surprise Noah more than anything else. He blinked, fresh tears spilling. You don't even know me. No. But I know what he did to you. And I know you don't deserve to die for being brave enough to leave an alpha who hurt you. Noah's monitor betrayed his emotional state, heart rate spiking, breath coming faster. Dr. Keller moved to adjust medication, but Mateo held up a hand, stopping him. Noah. Listen to me. Liam Foster is gone. He's answering for everything he's done to you, to others, to people he stole from. He won't touch you again. Won't come near you again. That part of your life is over. You can't promise that. Noah's voice was small, defeated. Alphas like Liam don't just go away. They come back. They always come back. Not this time. Mateo's tone carried absolute certainty. I've made sure of it. Noah studied his face, the sharp features, the cold eyes that somehow held warmth when they looked at him, the expensive clothes that marked him as someone from a world Noah had never touched. Who are you, really? Someone who stops alphas like Liam. That's not an answer. It's the only one that matters right now. Mateo stood, preparing to leave. Rest. Heal. When you're stronger, I'll explain everything. Wait, Noah's hand moved weakly, reaching toward him. Don't leave. Please. I don't want to be alone. Mateo paused, looking down at Noah's broken body, his terrified eyes, his desperate need for something, someone, to anchor him in a world that had tried to erase him. He sat back down. I'll stay. Noah's good eye closed, relief washing over his battered face. Thank you. The monitors settled into steadier rhythms. Dr. Keller dimmed the lights further, giving them privacy. Mateo sat in the chair beside Noah's bed, silent sentinel in the darkness, watching him breathe. Noah drifted between consciousness and sleep, sometimes murmuring words Mateo couldn't quite hear, sometimes crying softly without waking. Each time his breathing quickened with nightmares, Mateo spoke quietly, assurances Noah probably couldn't process, but that seemed to calm him nonetheless. Hours passed. Dawn approached, turning the windows from black to gray. Noah woke fully as pale light filtered through blinds. He turned his head carefully this time, mindful of injuries, and found Mateo still sitting beside his bed. You stayed, he whispered. I said I would. Most people don't mean it. I'm not most people. Noah almost smiled, but the movement pulled at damaged tissue and he winced instead. I can tell. Mateo's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, read the message, and some tension left his shoulders. He looked back at Noah. Liam confessed. Everything. The theft, the assault, all of it. He's in custody. The people he stole from are handling his consequences. Will he go to prison? Eventually. After other debts are paid. Noah absorbed that information silently. Then, did you hurt him? For what he did to me? No. Why not? Because hurting him wouldn't heal you. Mateo stood, straightening his shirt. Revenge is satisfying for about 60 seconds. Then you're left with the same scars and a new weight to carry. I wanted you to have neither. Noah stared at him like he was speaking a foreign language. I don't understand you. You don't have to. You just have to trust that when I say you're safe, I mean it. I do. The words surprised them both. Noah looked as confused by his own certainty as Mateo felt hearing it. I don't know why. But I do. Mateo nodded once, something that might have been respect crossing his features. Then rest. Heal. Rebuild. When you're ready to leave here, I'll make sure you have resources. Apartment. Security. Whatever you need to start over without fear. Why would you do that? Because you deserved protection before. And you deserve support now. He moved toward the door. And because I failed you once. I won't do it again. Mateo. Noah's voice stopped him at the threshold. He looked back, silhouetted against the hallway light. Will I see you again? Probably not. My world and yours shouldn't intersect more than they already have. But you'll know I'm watching, Mateo continued. You'll know if trouble comes, someone will handle it before it reaches you. Noah's expression shifted, something between gratitude and sadness. That's a lonely way to protect people. Yes. Mateo agreed quietly. It is. Then he was gone, door closing softly behind him. Leaving Noah alone with his injuries and his monitors and the strange comfort of knowing a dangerous alpha had decided he was worth saving. Noah spent 8 days in Dr. Keller's clinic before he was strong enough to walk unassisted. 8 days of surgeries and physical therapy and nightmares that woke him screaming for help that finally came. 8 days of learning to breathe without pain, to move without agony, to exist without constantly checking doors and windows for Liam's return. He never came. The first morning Noah could stand without assistance, he shuffled to the window and looked out at the city below, gray buildings and traffic and people moving through their lives with the casual certainty of safety. He'd forgotten what that felt like. Forgotten what it meant to move through the world without calculating exits and escape routes. Dr. Keller entered carrying fresh bandages. You're healing faster than expected. The ribs especially. You must have good genetics. Or stubbornness. Noah turned from the window. When can I leave? Medically? 3 more days. Practically, Dr. Keller set the bandages down, expression serious. Do you have somewhere safe to go? Noah's apartment was still in his name, but the thought of returning there, to walls Liam had touched, to spaces he'd occupied, to memories embedded in every corner, made his chest tighten. I don't know. Mr. Reyes arranged accommodations. New apartment, fully furnished, security system installed. He asked me to give you this when you were ready. Dr. Keller handed him an envelope. Inside, keys, an address on the north side, and a handwritten note on expensive paper. The lease is in your name. Rent paid for 2 years. Security monitored 24/7. Your belongings have been moved from your old apartment. Bank account established in your name, enough for 6 months' living expenses. Use it to heal. Use it to start over. You owe me nothing. Emma. Noah read it twice, trying to reconcile the generosity with the dangerous alpha who'd sat beside his bed for hours. This is too much. For him, it's barely a gesture. Dr. Keller began changing Noah's bandages with practiced efficiency. Mateo Reyes operates in a world where money is leverage and power is currency. But occasionally, very occasionally, he uses both for something that looks suspiciously like kindness. You've known him long. Long enough to understand he's complicated. Dangerous, yes. Criminal, absolutely. But there's a code buried under all that coldness. Lines he won't cross. People he won't abandon once they're under his protection. Noah winced as Dr. Keller probed tender ribs. Why me? Why does he care what happens to me? Because you got hurt in his war. Because Liam made you collateral damage in crimes that had nothing to do with you. Mateo doesn't tolerate innocent casualties. Dr. Keller finished the bandaging. Also, I think you remind him that not everyone in his world is broken beyond repair. That some people still deserve saving. I don't feel saved. I feel rearranged. Noah looked down at his healing body, at bruises fading from purple to yellow, at scars that would remain long after pain disappeared. Like someone reached into my life, pulled out all the broken pieces, and put them back together in a different order. Is that better or worse than before? Noah considered. Before meant Liam. Before meant fear masquerading as love, control disguised as care, violence explained away as passion. Before meant disappearing into someone else's definition of who he should be. Better, he admitted quietly. Definitely better. Day 11. Noah was discharged with prescriptions, physical therapy instructions, and Dr. Keller's personal number in case anything feels wrong. A car waited outside, black sedan. Driver in a suit who introduced himself as James and said nothing else. He drove Noah to the north side address, helped carry the few belongings Noah had accumulated during recovery, and handed him the keys. Mr. Reyes wanted me to tell you the security system is active. Panic button in every room. Someone monitors it constantly. You need anything at all, there's a number programmed into the phone on your kitchen counter. Noah stood in the doorway of his new apartment, overwhelmed. It was beautiful. Hardwood floors, large windows, furniture that looked expensive but comfortable. Nothing like the cramped studio he'd shared with Liam, where every surface held memories of arguments and apologies and the slow erosion of self-worth. This place felt clean. Untouched. Like possibility made physical. Thank you, he told James. James nodded and left without ceremony. Noah walked through the apartment slowly, cataloging details. His paintings, the ones he'd thought lost, hung on the walls, professionally framed. His art supplies arranged in the second bedroom, which had been converted into a studio with perfect northern light. His books on shelves he didn't own before. His life. Reconstructed by someone who'd paid attention to what mattered. He found the phone James mentioned. One number programmed. Noah stared at it for a long time before dialing. It rang once. Noah. Mateo's voice, immediately recognizable. You moved my paintings. You're an artist. You need your work. You framed them. These frames cost more than I made in 6 months. Art should be presented properly. A pause. Are you settling in? Noah looked around his new apartment, his new life, feeling gratitude and confusion warring inside his chest. Why are you doing this? The apartment, the money, the protection. You don't owe me anything. I owe you everything. Mateo's voice was quiet. You nearly died because I used you without permission. Because I needed what you knew more than I protected what you were. That debt doesn't disappear because I wrote a check. So this is guilt. This is accountability. Noah sat down on the unfamiliar couch in his unfamiliar apartment. What happened to Liam? He confessed. Repaid what he stole. Currently serving the rest of his debt in ways that don't concern you. Is he alive? For now. Whether he stays that way depends on choices he makes going forward. Good. Noah surprised himself with the venom in his voice. Then, softer, will you visit? Check on me? No. The word landed like a door closing. Why not? Because my presence in your life is dangerous. Because people who know me become targets for people who hate me. Because you deserve safety more than you deserve my company. Mateo exhaled slowly. You're rebuilding, Noah. Building something new from pieces Liam tried to destroy. Don't let me become another complicated alpha who dictates your world. You're nothing like him. I'm exactly like him. I just hide it better. A long pause. Be safe, Noah Bennett. Make art. Build a life. Forget the night you almost died and the alpha who couldn't save you fast enough. Mateo. The line went dead. Noah sat holding the phone, tears streaming down his healing face. Not from sadness, but from the strange ache of being protected by someone who refused to stay. Someone who'd saved his life and then disappeared because he believed his presence would damage what he'd fought to preserve. He understood it. Even hated it a little. But he also knew Mateo Reyes was right. His new life couldn't include the alpha who'd orchestrated its beginning. That would be trading one complicated relationship for another, swapping Liam's control for Mateo's protection, losing himself again in someone else's definition of safety. Noah stood, wiped his eyes, and walked to the studio. His easel waited. Clean canvas. Fresh paint. He picked up a brush and began creating something new. 4 months of physical therapy taught Noah that healing wasn't linear. Some days he woke without pain, body moving smoothly, scars barely noticeable. Other days every breath hurt, every movement reminded him of the night Liam's fists rewrote his understanding of vulnerability. The therapist said this was normal. Said trauma lived in the body long after wounds closed. Noah learned to live with both versions of himself. He painted through the hard days, bold colors, aggressive brushstrokes, canvases that screamed what he couldn't say aloud. The studio became his sanctuary, the place where rage and grief and relief could coexist without apology. The Copper Gallery called 6 weeks after his discharge. His old boss, Maria, voice careful and kind. Noah, honey, I heard about everything. Are you okay? Noah almost laughed. Was he okay? He was alive, which was more okay than Liam intended. I'm managing. Listen, I have a collector asking about your butterfly series. The Metamorphosis paintings. They want to commission new work, 12 pieces, full creative control, budget that'll keep you comfortable for a year. You interested? Noah looked at the canvas he'd been working on, a figure emerging from darkness, wings forming from wounds. Yes. I'm interested. The commission gave him purpose beyond survival. He worked 12-hour days, losing himself in paint and possibility, creating art that documented transformation without romanticizing trauma. Each piece told truth, that change was violent, that growth required destruction, that becoming someone new meant mourning who you used to be. The collector loved them. Paid triple his asking price. Asked for 20 more. Noah Bennett became, against all odds, successful. The panic attack started 3 months in. Sudden. Devastating. Triggered by nothing and everything, an alpha's voice raised in anger, footsteps behind him, the sound of truck engines. His therapist said this was also normal. Said hypervigilance was his nervous system trying to prevent future harm by catastrophizing present safety. Noah learned breathing techniques. Grounding exercises. The phone number James had given him, which connected to a security team that talked him down from ledges only he could see. He never called Mateo. The temptation was there, especially at 3 a.m. when nightmares woke him and silence felt like drowning. But Mateo had been clear. His presence was danger disguised as protection, and Noah was done letting alphas, even well-intentioned ones, define the boundaries of his world. He saved himself instead. One panic attack at a time. One nightmare survived. One day of choosing to keep breathing when breathing felt impossible. Liam Foster's name appeared in the news 4 months after that night. Noah saw it while scrolling his phone. Local alpha dies in custody following confession to multiple crimes. He read the article twice. Feeling nothing. Then everything. Then nothing again. Liam was dead. Not from Mateo's hands, but from consequences he'd spent years outrunning. The article mentioned theft, assault, connections to organized crime. It mentioned an Omega he'd nearly killed. It didn't mention Noah's name. Mateo's influence, he suspected. Keeping his privacy protected even in death's paperwork. Noah closed his phone and returned to his painting. That night, he dreamed of snow and silence and the moment he'd given up, believing nobody was coming. He woke gasping, checking locks, confirming the security system's green light. Then he called his therapist and talked until dawn broke. The gallery opening happened on a Tuesday in spring. Noah stood among his paintings, 24 pieces documenting transformation from victim to survivor to something beyond simple categories. Critics called it visceral, unflinching, a testament to Omega resilience. Noah called it exorcism. Maria found him hiding in the corner, overwhelmed by attention. You okay? Ask me tomorrow. Fair. Maria squeezed his shoulder. There's someone here asking for you. Says he's a friend, but wouldn't give his name. Noah's heart jumped. He scanned the crowd, searching for sharp features and cold eyes that sometimes held warmth. But the man approaching wasn't Mateo. He was younger, dressed casually, carrying a small package. Noah Bennett? Yes. Delivery for you. From someone who couldn't attend but wanted you to have this. He handed Noah the package and disappeared into the crowd before Noah could ask questions. Noah opened it carefully. Inside, a small card and a photograph. The photograph showed him unconscious on the frozen road, snow falling, darkness pressing close. But in the frame's corner, barely visible, a figure approached. Mateo. Captured mid-stride, walking toward him through the night. The card read, "You survived because you're stronger than the cold, the violence, and the alphas who thought they could break you. I was just there to witness it. Proud of what you've built. Emma." Noah stared at the photograph, at the visual proof that someone had come, that he hadn't been abandoned to die alone, that consequence had arrived exactly when it needed to. He tucked the photo into his bag and returned to his gallery opening. To the art he'd made from ashes. To the life he'd built from broken pieces. To the future Liam never imagined he'd survive to see. That night, alone in his apartment, Noah hung the photograph above his easel. Not as a reminder of trauma, but as evidence of truth, that the worst night of his life had also been the beginning of becoming someone new. That survival wasn't passive. It was choice, repeated daily, to keep existing despite every reason to quit. He picked up his brush and began a new painting. A figure walking through snow toward light he couldn't see yet, trusting it existed somewhere ahead. Noah Bennett, painting his own rescue. Noah Bennett, finally free. 6 months after the gallery opening, Noah woke to a familiar ache in his lower back. Nothing unusual, he'd been working long hours in the studio, hunched over canvases, pushing himself harder than he should. But the nausea that followed was new. And the exhaustion that clung to him despite 12 hours of sleep. And the way his scent had changed, subtly, almost imperceptibly, but enough that he noticed when he caught a whiff of himself in the bathroom mirror. Honey and something floral, yes. But underneath it, something else. Something richer. Deeper. The pregnancy test sat on the counter for 3 minutes before Noah worked up the courage to look at it. Positive. He stared at the 2 pink lines, brain refusing to process what they meant. He'd been careful. Always careful. After everything with Liam, the last thing he wanted was to be tied to anyone, let alone to an alpha he'd never see again. But here it was. Proof that one night, one single, reckless night, had changed everything. Noah sat down on the bathroom floor, back against the wall, and tried to remember. It had been 3 weeks after the gallery opening. He'd been working late, painting the piece he'd later call Rescue, when the security system had alerted him to a visitor. Matteo. He'd stood in Noah's doorway, looking almost out of place in the soft light of the apartment. Dark coat, sharp features, that same cold composure that somehow melted when his eyes landed on Noah. "I know I said I wouldn't come," Matteo had said. "But I needed to see. Needed to know you were really okay." Noah had invited him in. They'd talked for hours, about the gallery, about the paintings, about the months since that night on the frozen road. Matteo had told him about Liam's confession, about the Bellamy operation, about the careful machinery of consequence he'd spent years perfecting. And then, somehow, they'd ended up in Noah's bedroom. It hadn't been planned. Hadn't been calculated. Just 2 alphas, one omega, one alpha, finding comfort in each other's arms after everything they'd survived. Matteo's scent had been overwhelming. Oak and smoke and something sharp, like winter air. It had wrapped around Noah, pulling him in, making him feel safe in a way he hadn't felt in years. The claiming bite had been instinct. Matteo's teeth sinking into the curve of Noah's neck, marking him in the most primal way possible. Noah had cried out, not in pain, but in relief. In surrender. In the overwhelming rightness of being claimed by an alpha who'd saved his life. They'd fallen asleep tangled together, Matteo's arms wrapped around him, their scents intertwined like they'd always been meant to be. And then Matteo had left. Before dawn. A note on the pillow, "I'm sorry. I shouldn't have stayed. You deserve better than this. Emma." Noah had cried when he read it. But he'd understood. Matteo's world was dangerous. His presence in Noah's life was a risk. Leaving was the only way to keep Noah safe. He'd thought that was the end of it. A single, beautiful, heartbreaking night. Now, staring at the positive pregnancy test, Noah realized nothing was ever that simple. The doctor's office was clean and clinical, smelling of antiseptic and paper. Noah sat on the examination table, hands gripping the edge, trying to keep his breathing steady. "Congratulations," Dr. Patel said, looking at the ultrasound screen. "You're about 8 weeks along. Everything looks healthy. Strong heartbeat." Noah stared at the screen, at the tiny pulse of light that represented a life growing inside him. A life he hadn't planned. A life that was half his, half. "Would you like to know the sex?" Dr. Patel asked. Noah shook his head. Not yet. He wasn't ready for that. He wasn't ready for any of this. But as he drove home, one thought kept circling in his mind: Matteo needed to know. Noah sat in his apartment for 3 hours before he worked up the courage to make the call. His hand trembled as he dialed the number James had given him, the one that connected directly to Matteo's security team. It rang twice before a voice answered. "Reyes Security. I need to speak to Matteo. It's urgent." A pause. "He's not available right now. Can I take a message?" "This is Noah Bennett. He'll want to take this call." Another pause, longer this time. Then, "Hold, please." Noah waited. His heart pounded so loudly he could hear it in his ears. What was he going to say? How do you tell an alpha you barely know that you're carrying his pup? The line clicked. "Noah." Matteo's voice, rough and urgent. "Are you okay? What happened?" "I'm fine. Noah took a deep breath. "I need to see you. In person. It's important." Silence. Then, "I can't. You know I can't. It's not safe. I'm pregnant." The words hung in the air between them. Noah could hear Matteo's breathing on the other end, sharp, uneven. The controlled composure cracking in a way he'd never heard before. "Say that again." "I'm pregnant. 8 weeks. Noah's voice broke. "It's yours." From that night. After the gallery. More silence. Then, so quietly Noah almost missed it, "Where are you?" "Home." "Stay there. Don't move." "I'm coming." The line went dead. Matteo arrived in 23 minutes. Noah opened the door to find him standing in the hallway, coat thrown over his shoulders, hair disheveled in a way that suggested he'd driven like a madman to get here. His scent was wild, oak and smoke sharp with anxiety, his alpha instincts clearly in overdrive. "Are you sure?" Matteo asked, stepping inside without waiting for an invitation. "The test. Positive. I went to the doctor today. 8 weeks." Noah's hand moved instinctively to his still flat stomach. "It's yours." Matteo stared at him. Then he reached out, pulling Noah into his arms, pressing his face into Noah's hair. His scent wrapped around them both, overwhelming and comforting, and Noah felt something in his chest loosen. "I'm sorry," Matteo whispered. "I shouldn't have left. I should have stayed. I should have. You were trying to protect me. That's not an excuse." Matteo pulled back, cupping Noah's face in his hands. "I spent 6 months telling myself I was doing the right thing. That keeping my distance was the only way to keep you safe. And all I did was make you face this alone." Noah shook his head. "I'm not alone. I have you now. You came. I'll always come." Matteo's voice was fierce. "Whatever you need, whenever you need it. I'm not leaving again. Promise? I promise. Mateo's hand slid down to rest on Noah's stomach, his touch gentle, reverent. There's a life in here. Our life. And I'm going to protect both of you with everything I have. Noah's eyes filled with tears. Not from sadness, but from relief. From the overwhelming weight of being loved, truly loved, by an alpha who'd proved he would do anything to keep him safe. I don't know how to be a parent, Noah admitted. I don't even know how to be an omega who doesn't flinch at loud noises. Neither do I. But we'll figure it out together. Mateo leaned in, pressing his forehead against Noah's. Their scents mingled, honey and oak, omega and alpha, two halves of a whole that had finally found each other. I love you, Mateo said. I've loved you since the night I found you in the snow. I was just too afraid to admit it. Noah laughed, a broken, beautiful sound. I love you too. Even when I tried not to. Mateo kissed him. Gentle. Tender. A promise of everything that was to come. Outside, the snow had started falling again, soft and relentless, covering the city in white. But inside Noah's apartment, warm and safe, two alphas held each other and dreamed of the future. The past was behind them. The future stretched ahead. And for the first time in his life, Noah Bennett believed he deserved to be happy. Mateo moved in 3 weeks later. It wasn't a decision they made lightly. Noah had spent years living under Liam's control, and the thought of sharing his space with anyone, even Mateo, made his chest tight with old fears. But Mateo understood. He gave Noah space when he needed it, held him when he asked, and never pushed for more than Noah was ready to give. Their mating bond grew stronger with each passing day. Noah's scent changed again, honey and floral, now tinged with the warmth of carrying a pup. It made Mateo's alpha instinct sing, filled him with a fierce protectiveness he'd never known he was capable of. They painted together in the studio. Cooked together in the kitchen. Fell asleep together on the couch, Noah's head on Mateo's chest, the steady rhythm of their heartbeats lulling them both to sleep. And when Noah's belly began to swell, when the pup inside him grew strong enough to kick, Mateo would press his hand to the curve of Noah's stomach and talk to it in low, gentle words. You're going to be so loved, he'd whisper. Your dad and we're going to protect you from everything. You're never going to know fear the way he did. I promise. Noah would watch him, tears in his eyes, and wonder how he'd gotten so lucky. How a single night of violence had led to a lifetime of love. The pup came on a Thursday. A boy. Small and perfect, with Noah's dark hair and Mateo's sharp eyes. They named him Gabriel, after Noah's grandfather, the only good alpha he'd ever known as a child. Noah held him in his arms, tears streaming down his face, while Mateo stood beside him, one hand on his shoulder and the other reaching down to brush the tiny fingers of their son. He's beautiful, Mateo whispered. He's ours. Noah looked up at him, exhausted but radiant. We did this. We did. Mateo leaned down, pressing a kiss to Noah's forehead. And we're going to do it right. Together. Noah smiled, looking down at Gabriel. At the new life they'd created from the ashes of his old one. Outside the window, the snow was falling. Soft. Relentless. Beautiful. But inside, everything was warm. For the first time in his life, Noah Bennett was home. The end.